This is Chapter 7, Lesson 4, Subtracting Linear Expressions. Yesterday you took your quiz with the adding linear expressions, and it just says when subtracting linear expressions, subtract like terms. As with adding linear expressions, you can use models and zero pairs if needed. We didn't use the models before, and we're not going to use them here again, but I'm going to show you what I want to see for your work. So I'm going to rewrite the problem, because on your work you're going to need to rewrite the problem in your or on your paper. And I kind of briefly talked about this last week. What I said is when you get subtraction here, you want to basically distribute that negative to these problems. So I'm going to leave just this as 5x plus 4. Now I'm distributing that negative in front of the 3. So it would be a because it's a positive, a negative times a positive would be a negative 3x. Then the negative times the positive, it's going to be a negative 2. So now is when I combine my like terms. So I have a 5, and then always take the sign in front of it, and then I have that negative 3x. So a positive 5 and a negative 3 becomes a positive 2x. Then I combine my other like terms, my 4 and my negative 2. So a positive 4 and a negative 2 becomes a positive 2. And that's it. So now your answer is 2x plus 2. All of this work that they're showing down here makes it a little bit more difficult. So that's why I like to show the distributive property of that negative sign, circle your like terms and put arrows. So we'll do that for example, B. I'm rewriting the problem. Negative 4x minus 6 minus a negative x minus 3. So there's a lot going on here. What you do is right in front of the parentheses, use the distributive property. If I circle that, everything else before it I can just bring down. So I've got a negative 4x because nothing changes, minus 6. So then I take a negative times the negative, and that's going to be a positive x. Then I take the negative times the negative, and that's going to be a positive 3. Then you circle in front. I have a negative 4x plus a positive 4x. So a negative and a positive you subtract, keep the sign of the bigger number, so these become a negative 3x. Then I'm going to combine my other like terms, which is a negative 6 and a positive 3. Show my lines that I'm bringing them down. So if I'm subtracting, it's 3. 6 minus 3 is 3. I keep the sign of the bigger number, so it's going to be a negative 3. So that is your final answer, a negative 3x minus 3. Go ahead right now and pause the video and do number 1. After you've paused the video, I want you to watch it to see if you have done number 1 correctly. So you should have worked out this problem, copying the problem exactly like it is on your paper. Circling that negative, showing that you're going to distribute it. You have to show this work. So then I have 7x minus 5. And then I got a negative times a positive would be a negative 2x. A negative times a negative would become a positive 1. Circle my like terms. 7x, negative 2x. You're always circling a sign in front of it. So I've got 7 minus 2, which would be 5x. Then my other like terms are my negative 5 and my positive 1, because basically I'm combining it, because once I put the distributive property in there, all you have to do is combine like terms, and it's just like adding. So it's a negative 5 plus 1 would be a negative 4. Pause the video again and try 1B. you are going to distribute the negative first. Copy the problem down, circle that negative, and distribute it. Everything in front of it can be written the same. So a negative times a positive 2x would be a negative 2x. A negative times a negative 4 would become a positive 4. Circle your like terms and the sign in front of it. So I have a 6x and a negative 2x, which would become a positive 4x. I have a negative 4 and a positive 4. Oh, I didn't draw my lines. Have to draw your lines. A negative 4 and a positive 4, what does that become? 0. So I'm really not going to put the plus 0. You want to leave the problem as just 4x. Looking at our next set of examples, example 2, we are doing it precisely the same way. I'm going to rewrite my problem. 3x plus 2 minus negative 2x plus 1. Again, they're talking about having your 0 pairs, how you have the 3 x's and you have your negative 2's. To me, that just gets confusing. But if you want to watch how they do it with the manipulatives, go ahead and look through it here, and also go ahead and hit the watch button and the tutor button. If the way that I've been showing it to you here is just fine, go ahead and skip those videos. Distribute that negative sign. Keep everything else the same. So a negative times a negative becomes a positive 2x. The negative times a positive becomes a negative 1. Combine your like terms, keeping the sign in front of it. 3x and 2x. So 3x plus 2x is 5x. A positive 2 and a negative 1, combining them becomes a positive 1. And that's it. So even though we're subtracting linear equations or expressions, when you're subtracting, if you just distribute that subtraction sign to make everything positive, it goes back to like you're adding everything. Take a second, pause the video, and do 2a. You would have distributed that negative. So I keep everything else in front, and a negative 2 times a positive 2 would become a negative 2x. A negative times a negative becomes a positive 1. Circle what I'm going to combine. I have an x and a negative 2x. This is like saying it's a 1x. So a negative 2 and a positive 1 becomes a, I'm going to write it, oh, you can't see it, so I'm going to write it right underneath here. So I've got a negative x. You can say 1x, but it's best to get used to getting rid of that. Then I have my negative 5 and a positive 1. Those come down to be a negative 4. And you always want your variable to be first. Go ahead and do 2b. Yeah, distributing the negative. So I have 6m plus 3. A negative times the negative becomes a positive 4m. The negative times the negative becomes a positive 1. Combine my like terms. 6m and 4m becomes 10m. The positive 3 and the positive 1 become